Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be looking at France financial crisis. For those who haven't heard, France is going through a financial crisis that could completely destroy their economy and leave it in shambles. France's debt ratio stands at its all-time high of 114% of its GDP, which is expected to rise to 116% or 118% by 2026. France's 2024 budget deficit hovered around 6%, which is well above the 3% EU's threshold, with growth rate at its all-time low of 0.6% and is expected to rise modestly to 1 or 1.3% by 2026. With unemployment rate currently around 7.9% and is expected to hit 8% by the end of 2025. So France is in deep financial crisis. Of course, with the Prime Minister, Francois Bayrou, losing the vote of confidence of its parliament. What could actually be happening to France? Someone quickly said, they miss exploiting Guinea-Bissau, Niger, and other African countries. Could this actually be the reason why France is going down by the drain? I'm going to actually pull up a particular video where a young man described what is currently happening to the French economy.
Oh, France is getting ready to collapse, and nobody's talking about this. And this is not me just fear-mongering. No, look. Fears of French collapse sound the alarms. French stock slides as Paris government faces risk of collapse. Timestamp there. France may need an International Monetary Fund bailout. Reuters, French stocks, bonds tumble as government faces potential collapse. Market Watch talking about the collapse. So what exactly went wrong in France and what's going to happen next? We can see that the public debt hovers around 3.3 trillion euros, which is around 113% gross domestic product, which is the highest in recent history. The budget deficit also remains stubbornly high, projected at 5.4% of GDP in 2025, with warning signs of persistent weak fiscal discipline pushing it closer to 6% without significant intervention. Now, keep in mind, their goal for their budget deficit is 3%. They're double that, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to get down to that 3% anytime soon. So they need an influx of cash desperately, and they may have to turn to the International Monetary Fund to help bail them out. Because once news got out about how bad it really is financially in France, investors immediately started selling off in the stock market and selling their bonds off too. Now, it's important to note that France is the second biggest economy in the European Union. So the fact that they're collapsing means this is going to send shockwaves through the entire European Union. So France really has to do something fast because this is not good for the EU at all. So what options does France really have right now? The first and most important thing that they absolutely have to do is create their own version of what the United States created in Doge. They've already stated that they're spending way too much money and they need to cut back on that wasteful spending. So creating a version of Doge will help cut in to that debt to GDP ratio that's been devastating for them. Next, and as sad as this may be, they may have to take this bailout from the IMF. Obviously, it's not ideal, but in order to keep the country going, you may have to do something like this, but time will tell if they actually do. The last thing they have to do is a confidence vote. Since all of this is happening, they have to decide if the current leader in France is fit to actually lead the country out of the current situation it's in. If the rest of the countries in the EU decide, no, he's not fit for the bill, he's going to get voted out, and they're going to put somebody new in that can help with this problem. So France is on the risk of collapse, and it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with all of this.
Now, having looked at that, there is something amazing going on in Niger Republic, which used to be one of the gold mines of France. Yes. We're also going to look at what is currently happening in Niger Republic, which is one of France's making cash cow, if I must say. Could it be that it's because of the reforms currently going on? There are no more cheap uranium for France to actually exploit. Could this be the reason why their economy is struggling? I'm going to pull up a particular video from David Hundeyin that actually described the parasitic relationship between France and Niger and what is set to happen now that the Republic is set to go into partnership with Russia.
Now, Russia's ambitions in Africa have just taken a striking leap forward, eyeing the vast uranium riches of Niger.
Except it's not as simple as eyeing the vast mineral riches of Niger. In this case, something is happening that represents a brand new model of foreign investment and international economic partnership with Africa. Having signed a memorandum of understanding with Niger in July for cooperation in the development of peaceful nuclear energy, Russia has submitted an official proposal to build a nuclear reactor in Niger, which will be the country's first ever nuclear reactor and only Africa's second functioning nuclear reactor. Here's some context to understand why this is such a big deal for Niger and for Africa. So Niger has been exporting uranium from its existing 3 uranium mines since 1971. Until 2023, all 3 mines were controlled by French companies, with the bulk of Niger's uranium production going to France. Now, roughly 77% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power, which it generates using uranium. As of 2022, Niger was France's second largest uranium supplier, and this is roughly how much electricity is consumed in France annually. So it's fair to say that a double-digit percentage of France's electricity supply was for many years directly dependent on Nigerian uranium. Now, compare the figures you just saw with the equivalent figures for Niger. Do you see the problem here? Since the end of World War II, France has built itself a roaring $3 trillion economy, powered overwhelmingly by nuclear power, whose fuel comes from a place that barely has any power at all. In the 42 years that France mined uranium in Niger, it never occurred to the French that a country with a population equivalent to 40% of France and landmass double the size of France might need electricity for its people or might have ambitions of its own. In fact, the only time the French public even became aware that a significant fraction of their energy mix was coming out of one of the poorest and least electrified places on Earth was after the 2023 coup, and even then, it was only in this context. How did it affect France? How does it affect us? Niger and its 27 million inhabitants, be damned. So with this context, you can understand why Russia's proposal is nothing short of groundbreaking. The French way of doing business in Africa was the empire's classic MO. Invest only in mining and evacuation infrastructure, pay locals peanuts to do unskilled, labor-intensive jobs, get the desired natural resources out of the ground and onto trains and trucks heading to the ports as quickly as possible, ensure there's zero localization of the value chain, and generally make sure as little economic benefit as possible accrues to the locals. In fact, the French extracted uranium so efficiently from Niger that they actually exhausted 2 of those 3 mines, all the while making sure that Niger was benefiting as little as possible from all the wealth that it was giving up. The Russian proposal turns this paradigm on its head. Rather than a one-sided extractive relationship, where for some reason one side must be poor and miserable for the other side to be wealthy, both sides are presented with a genuine win-win scenario. Russia gets to develop an important new source of nuclear fuel for its own nuclear program, and then instead of just paying Niger money, which would simply lock Niger even further into import dependency and poverty, Niger instead gets game-changing energy infrastructure, allows the country potentially to explore the value chain of its own uranium. That's more than just teaching a man how to fish. That's giving him the tools and knowledge required to build his own fishing trawler. And it will be an excellent rebuttal to the empire's fundamentally false notion. It is acceptable and sustainable that, despite not having a single deposit of uranium anywhere in France, Paris gets to be called the City of Lights due to cheap nuclear energy, while the place where the nuclear fuel actually comes from gets to look like this. Thank goodness for multipolarity.
Meanwhile, France's economy is busy collapsing and our president is busy running to France every Eke market day. What could he actually be looking for? Let's have your thoughts in the comment section. See you around. Bye.